I think one of the things that attracted a lot of people to Cardano was the long-term thinking. While a lot of blockchains seemed intensely focused on the short-term here and now, Charles and IOG and all of Cardano seemed to have a long-term plan for everything. While the EVM world was already preoccupied with current TVL and million-dollar NFTs, Charles was talking about how to become the first blockchain to achieve real mass adoption among the mainstream, not just among crypto enthusiasts, but among regular consumers. One of the big steps in that plan was reaching out to the ocean of non blockchain developers. It looks like Cardano is now starting to see the results of taking its first steps, wading out into that ocean years ago. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the sudden appearance of Plutus core programs generated from Typescript, ScoreX and its evolution. And don't worry, we're going to make those sections fun. They're not going to be super boring and technical. They're going to be fun. A big difference between Cardano and Ethereum, a big difference between everyone and Solana, FutureFest making some overtures in the direction of real human beings working in Cardano metaverses, and an interesting question about the biggest challenge facing Web3. If your first thought when you see this image is whether or not you can convince your significant other that this was actually a photo of a luxurious vacation you took to the South Pacific before you met them, or if you've been finding value in these videos for the last 399 episodes, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Many of you will remember when Charles first debuted this concept of the island, the pond, and the ocean. The pond is Ethereum, the island is Cardano, the ocean is all of the rest of the developers out there in the world. This is to illustrate the relative size of the communities, or the size they will be. Because if you aren't aware, blockchain developers are a micro drop in the bucket of developers. Why is that? It's because a lot of developers don't want to learn Solidity. They don't want to learn Plutus. They don't even want to learn Haskell. They already know some normal programming languages, and they don't want to learn any programming languages just so they can become blockchain developers. Okay, a lot do, because we obviously do have some blockchain developers, but it's a tiny sliver. It's a tiny sliver of the population of developers. The vast majority of developers, they know languages like Python and JavaScript and Java, and they're not interested in learning these blockchain languages because there are plenty of things for them to work on in Python, in JavaScript. And sure, you can say that a lot of developers want to add languages to their repertoire. That's certainly true, and some of them will choose to learn blockchain languages. But this pond, island, and ocean metaphor really is kind of illustrative of the relative size of these populations. Luckily, Cardano did not go with this kind of concept of just sort of building out your own programming language and then hoping that magically, somehow, like a field of dreams, you could build it and they will come. That's not what Cardano did. Instead, Cardano seemed to know from the start that they would have to make it easy for that ocean to reach the island. And we're now starting to see a little bit of results from the sort of conceptual planting of that seed. I think because in the Cardano ecosystem, we've always known that the goal was to access that ocean of developers. Now Cardano is starting to see members of the community just sort of doing this on their own. Here we see a post from, looks like Michelle from Harmonic, who says, I have the honor to show you the first ever untyped Plutus core program entirely generated and serialized using only TypeScript. This ultimately proves that the Plu-TS, I'm guessing that's supposed to be pronounced Plutus. It's like an alternative. I'm guessing that's Plutus TypeScript. Plu-TS is not only a cool idea, but a project that can't wait to improve Cardano's smart contract development experience. And here you can see it right there. They're not just telling you, but showing you. And down below here, we find out Plu-TS is a project that wants to allow smart contracts and transaction creation only using TypeScript, allowing to build dApps that are able to run entirely client-side, resulting in truly decentralized applications, all without sacrificing what Cardano smart contracts can offer. If you are interested, here's the GitHub repo. I know a few of you are probably out there saying to yourself, hey, I have no idea what TypeScript is. Please stop using mystery words. Never fear, interwebs to the rescue. Mystery solved. Typescriptlang.org tells us TypeScript is JavaScript with syntax for types. TypeScript is a strongly typed programming language that builds on JavaScript, giving you better tooling at any scale. TypeScript code converts to JavaScript. TypeScript understands JavaScript and uses type inference to give you great tooling without additional code. So if you've tried at all to learn even the very beginning basics, the very first fundamentals of Haskell, you probably, even if you had done zero learning of any kind of programming previous to that, you probably ran into this concept of types. So you can understand how JavaScript with syntax for types, right here in bold letters, it would be appropriate. That would be appropriate, an appropriate bridge between JavaScript and Plutus, which is Haskell based. But now we have programs running in Plutus Core that are entirely generated from TypeScript, a JavaScript with syntax for types. This is pretty big. While this is, apparently just a first step, and you can see they're trying to get people to contribute to the repo, this is a pretty big first step, because when we think about the programming languages out there that have a lot of developers, JavaScript is certainly one of them. And if those JavaScript developers can do what they're directed to do by typescriptlang.org here, adopt TypeScript gradually. There's all kinds of instructions on how basically JavaScript developers can start adopting TypeScript. If they could do that, then, and if this TypeScript for Plutus Core, this Plu-TS, can be developed further, there's a path here for JavaScript in Cardano. Of course, something like that probably never even would have been born if Cardano hadn't planted the conceptual seeds that we are trying to reach out to that ocean of developers. If Charles had been going on AMAs saying, hey guys, Plutus is the best. All you need is Haskell and Plutus. You don't need the object-oriented languages. You don't need the imperative languages. All you need is Plutus and Haskell. Just learn Plutus and Haskell. Don't think about other languages. Then we wouldn't be seeing this kind of thing. But in fact, they've been trying to tap into that ocean of developers for a long, long time. And an interesting way you can see that is in this article that was posted by IOHK Media today. The article is called Blockchain Tool Will Allow Java Developers to Build Blockchain Solutions. And they say, newly launched Blockchain in a Box development tool allows developers to rapidly create and deploy blockchain solutions harnessing the popular Scala programming language. It says early adopters have already successfully built products. And if we go down here, we see quotes about how great the ScoreX product is from Alex Chirpinoy of Ergo, of course, an executive director at Hyperledger, and Roman Pellerin of Input Output Global, which gives us a little hint about the evolution of this ScoreX product. A little Googling brings us to the repo for ScoreX at Hyperledger. And if we look at the README, we find out this is actually ScoreX 2, and the contributor section over here lets us know that Alex Chirpinoy is actually the biggest contributor with the most commits to this repo. So when we start reading the description, we find out that ScoreX is a complete rewrite of the ScoreX framework, which can be found in an IOHK repo. So it looks like this started out as an IOHK project. And if we go over to this repo, you find out that Alex Chirpinoy was also the biggest contributor over there. And then it made its way over here to Hyperledger, where Alex Chirpinoy, once again, biggest contributor. And when we look down here at examples, they actually have deployments of this ScoreX modular blockchain design and deployment system. And two of the examples are Ergo itself and this thing called Treasury Coin. The Treasury Coin link takes us to this paper from clear back in 2018, a treasury system for cryptocurrencies, enabling better collaborative intelligence. And of course, one of the authors is an IOHK researcher, Roman Oleynikov. Likewise, the ScoreX 1.0 repo over at the IOHK GitHub has commits going back as far as 7 years ago. This shows you how long IOHK and Charles and Cardano have been thinking about reaching out and tapping into this ocean of developers. 7 years ago, they were making commits to a repo that eventually would become a project over at the Hyperledger GitHub that would eventually become this blockchain in a box project for Java developers. Cardano's been playing a pretty long game here, but the beautiful thing is they've already played it a long time, and now those seeds that were planted so long ago are actually producing some results. That's just one example of the kind of long-term thinking that seems like it's always been sort of the underpinning of the entire conceptual framework of Cardano. But you know what was also an example of not just long-term thinking, but short and medium-term thinking as well? Naming the eras of Cardano after significant historical figures like Voltaire, Basho, Shelley, Byron, instead of things like the merge, the surge, the verge, the purge, and the splurge. These milestones, eras, whatever you want to call them in Ethereum, this sounds more like some kind of teenage parody of a reproductive health class. And when people talk about these stages on Ethereum's roadmap, and sort of in a critical tone, Vitalik has this to say: merge, surge, verge, purge, and splurge are not stages. They're all happening in parallel, guys. It's like, I love it when they get real serious and they still have to use these labels to talk about these different, apparently not stages or eras, but parallel events happening in Ethereum whenever they actually have to talk about them with these labels, because these are like the only labels for these events. It sounds even more ridiculous. While that's a pretty big distinction between Cardano and Ethereum, here's a huge difference between Solana and almost everybody in the crypto space. Solana now has physical retail stores, apparently. They look like this, and they sell merchandise like this. When I see this, I have to ask myself, does this look more like something a decentralized blockchain ecosystem would do? Or does this look like something that a regular VC-funded traditional company would do? While Solana seems to be busy putting up brick and mortar stores, apparently in malls, here's what one project in an actual decentralized blockchain is up to. The project is FutureFest, and they are telling us about metaverse jobs and gigs. Currently, metaverse experience can often feel completely dead. What is missing is the human touch. With this in mind, we will build the infrastructure to enable people to work in Cardano metaverses and get paid in crypto. And they give us, sort of some examples of what they're thinking of down here. They say mascots and greeters, branded mascots, and personalized social interactions. If you've been in a crypto metaverse before, you've probably experienced exactly what they're talking about. In the early days of Decentraland, you would go into Decentraland, and not only were there no buildings really yet, I mean, there were some buildings, but not many, not as many as they have now. And there were almost no people. You'd go into Decentraland and you'd run into almost no one. Occasionally you'd see a person. And even now, when I go into Decentraland, I'll see people sporadically here and there. Whether or not they want to interact with you is a totally different question. Sometimes they just kind of like fly past you pretty quickly, and there's absolutely no social interaction going on there. True, social interaction does happen, but it's very sporadic. There aren't a lot of humans. It's kind of like the Elon Musk conception of the Earth being underpopulated. That's how a lot of crypto metaverses are. Can you imagine though how much better an experience a lot of people will have if there are humans who are in there working to help populate these metaverse projects, especially in the early days? I think even as the metaverse projects kind of pick up some steam and they're a little bit more populated with normal users, there will be events and things where they want a higher density of people to interact with the users. I think there's a lot of use cases for this. There will definitely be sort of like project events and corporate events in these metaverses, and there will be a real economic case for humans to work these kind of gigs in the metaverse. I think as soon as that starts happening, if that starts happening, that's going to become a big thing, because I think a lot of people would much rather do this for several hours and make some money than go out and work the jobs they're currently working. Finally, IOHK posted this today. This is Brian Gell, who's co-CEO of this group, which does blockchain security audits. And he says, the day we stop seeing headlines that X amount of millions of dollars were lost due to a small vulnerability, at that point, we'll see mass adoption take place. And he's kind of citing the security risks in the robbery forest as the biggest challenge to Web3. I think he might be right about this. When we think about the big challenges to, Web3 and crypto in general as being about us not having found the right use case so far that's going to appeal to the mainstream. But even if we did find the right use case at this point, if you have a problem as severe as the one they're currently facing in the robbery forest, no mainstream users are going to want to jump in there anyways. So I think he's right. I think there's still, I think we still haven't happened upon the magic use case that is going to bring in the mainstream. Maybe we already have. It's probably just the money use case. We just hasn't captured the mainstream imagination yet. But even given that, with all the robbery forest problems, the mainstream still won't jump in. So I think he's right. I think we have to solve this robbery forest problem before we can see that mainstream adoption. And I think Cardano's security first approach is the way that's going to get solved. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.